We got our top 36 wide receivers for 2025 fantasy football on deck, where you should take them, pros and cons, bear and bull cases, all coming up here. Let's start with the first tier, the 101 Ja'Marr Chase. 2 top 6 overall picks in both of our rankings, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. It is pretty self-explanatory with these three. 19.8 PPR points per game over the last 3 seasons for CeeDee Lamb. 20.2 over the last 3 seasons for Justin Jefferson. 20.2 over the last 3 seasons for Ja'Marr Chase. Each one of them in 2022, it was the Jefferson year. 2023, it was the Lamb year. 2024, it was the Chase year. They each had that monster season that carried you guys to fantasy championships. Not much else I can say about these guys. Pass volume, high-end talent. The only issue and tiebreakers that we have here is that with J.J. McCarthy versus Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow, that is why we prefer Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb respectively to Justin Jefferson. But Jefferson, the talent, keeps him in this tier for me.
Yeah, I think I would put money on Jefferson being the best talent at the wide receiver position in the league. Like if I have to draft a receiver first overall to lead my franchise, I think Jefferson would be my number one option. But like you said, I think they're relatively similar median projections. The reason why I have Ja'Marr Chase at my 101, the reason why I have CeeDee Lamb at my 102, and there is a little bit of a discrepancy here for Jefferson, specifically for fantasy. I actually have Jefferson and Puka in the same tier at this current point. We'll touch upon Puka in a little bit, but for me, these top 2 specifically with Chase and Lamb represent the higher ceiling, the access to the 23, 24, 25 point per game upside because we've seen it before. And as optimistic as I am, again, I love J.J. McCarthy, former Michigan Wolverine, go Blue Baby, but at the same time, Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow, there's a reason why they're currently 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks in odds to lead the league in passing yards. J.J. McCarthy, I just simply don't see having that type of volume to support Jefferson to the level of the ceiling that Chase and Lamb represent.
Yeah, and if Darnold wasn't as good as he was last year, Jefferson, even with Darnold playing as well as he did, Jefferson only about like an 18-point per game receiver last year. So if J.J. McCarthy, let's say, produces 80% of what Sam Darnold produced last year, which I would say is a pretty good season, that would be like a 28, 29 touchdown season, 4,000 passing yard season from J.J. McCarthy. We could be looking at Justin Jefferson more in the range of like 17 to 19 points per game as opposed to like 20 plus, like I do think some of the next receivers can get to. And of course, Lamb and Chase, we've seen the access to that ceiling. But of course, if McCarthy is an absolute stud, then Jefferson's going to have no problem producing at a high level. It's just more uncertain as opposed to Burrow and Dak Prescott, who've done it for a long time. So moving into the next tier, mid to late first round guys, you have Puka Nabers, Malik Nabers, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr. All 4 of these guys are ranked inside the first round for me. I have Puka Nabers as the 108 in my drafts right now. Malik Nabers is the 107 in drafts right now. Nico Collins, my 112 in drafts right now. And Brian Thomas Jr., my 110 in drafts right now. I'll start us with Nabers because I've been the pro Nabers guy. He has ranked the highest of this group for me. It is pure target volume. He was pacing 193 targets last year during his rookie season, and you feel so excellent about what he can do from a target perspective. I actually liked what I saw to Russell Wilson and Jaxon Dart in the preseason. Maybe they have better quarterback play than we're thinking. And as I've made reference to on many occasions, Russell Wilson, when he was starting for the Steelers, they were like a 22 point per game scoring offense. He was operating at a decent level. It's not like he's going to be a world beater at quarterback at this point in his career, but he is definitely an upgrade to Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Tommy DeVito, who Malik Nabers produced a wide receiver 6 in points per game season with as a rookie last year.
Take it easy on my boy Tommy Cutlets. He tried his best.
He did try his best, but unfortunately he ruined everything to do with Malik Nabers for the most part. And Nabers was so good that it didn't matter. And the target volume, I don't expect it to go anywhere. I would not be shocked, and I would say the reason I have Malik Nabers wide receiver 4 is that of the non-Chase Jefferson Lamb guys, he is the one that I think has the highest likelihood to finish as wide receiver 1 overall in PPR formats simply due to the 180, 190 plus target upside. And the only caveat I have to that is assuming Matthew Stafford might be a concern for Puka Nabers.
Yeah, so I'm not quite there. I do have Malik Nabers as my wide receiver 6. He's my 110. The guy that I still have as my wide receiver 4 is Puka Nabers. I'll touch upon him in a second. Both Malik Nabers, you basically outlined it. Post-buy rookie bump. Again, I've phrased this on the channel before. Coined by Hayden Winks. Basically, we've seen historically rookies tend to produce at a higher clip after their bye week, whether that week is, them integrating more in the offense. For Malik Nabers' sake, obviously he was already integrated in the offense, but more so just developing that rapport, getting to that next level. Malik Nabers, after his bye week, 19.2 PPR points per game, 85.29 receiving yards per game. And we did see his yards per route run jump from 2.19 to 2.7 in that stretch. So just to show you on top of that, one of the highest in terms of route percentages in the league, or routes per game in the league, 36.75. Before that, still 35.86 after that. This is a team that doesn't have the luxury of being ahead in game scripts. They're going to have to throw the football. We saw Russell Wilson. He still has that deep ball that he had last year. We've heard reports all training camp that Malik Nabers been making plays. People have comped him to Jamar Chase. Even if he does prove to be that Chase level talent, which we both agree is in the range of outcomes, I do prefer the offensive insulation, assuming that Matthew Stafford is healthy, of a guy like Puka Nabers. Because we saw last year, Puka Nabers in the games that he played 50+% of the snaps, he outscored, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, all these top elite wide receivers in fantasy. Last year, 22.3 points per game in the games that he played 50+% of the snaps. So again, it is concerning. We will hear the reports from Stafford. Everything that we are hearing from Rams camp is pointing like, oh yeah, no, it's just maintenance. Again, depending on how real that is, we will keep monitoring. Like if you guys have a draft tomorrow, maybe you do rank Puka a little bit lower for that risk factor alone. But if Stafford is fully healthy, man, I would legitimately rank him ahead of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, no, and we might never get that answer fully. Like, let's say Stafford comes back and he's practicing, but he's still kind of a bit of an injury concern, then maybe you never put him ahead of Justin Jefferson. Personally, that's how I'm going to be handling things. But part of me wants to. Like, I'm scarred from putting players over Justin Jefferson after last year. But I will say that I do think it's definitely possible that Puka Nabers outscores Jefferson. And I would say if I knew Stafford would play 17 games, I would almost bet money that he outscores Justin Jefferson, given what he did when he was healthy last year, like you said. Both of these guys, I mean, Nabers and Puka, to me, they're both top 8 to 10 players in fantasy this year, especially in PPR formats. Nabers, like I said, the extremely low bar of 14 points is all the Giants had to score for Malik Nabers to average 21.7 PPR points per game. They scored 14 points or more in 9 games last year, and he averaged 21.7 PPR points in those games. And like you said, Puka Nabers really graduated to an elite level wide receiver, separating at a very, very high level in the 90th plus percentile across the board there. So with those two guys, I feel excellent about them. Nico Collins and Brian Thomas Jr., I guess we can go back and forth here because you have Collins ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. I have Thomas ahead of Collins. With Brian Thomas Jr., I got 16.7 points per game last year, wide receiver 11 overall finish, as we've talked about on numerous occasions. A lot of that production came without Trevor Lawrence. Down the stretch of the season, Trevor Lawrence was out for the final 7 games of the year, and Brian Thomas Jr. was breaking out amidst even Mac Jones playing quarterback for him. And at 21 years old, he was 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards, 8th in the NFL with a 2.55 yards per route run, and the number 2 dominator rating overall of his team's offense. So you add in Liam Cohn, you add in Travis Hunter. I tend to think that Hunter might get out to a bit of a slower start, which is why I'm ranking Brian Thomas aggressively. Even still, let's say Hunter is an absolute dominant force and he's a 16, 18 point per game producer as well. These guys can both coexist. Trevor Lawrence, I expect to take a pretty large step, and I do love what Liam Cohn can do. Let's say moving Brian Thomas Jr. around the formation a little bit more this year. He had 7 touchdowns out of the slot last year. Let's get him more in that type of role.
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned the post-bye rookie bump, weeks 13 to 18 for Brian Thomas Jr. Keep in mind, without Trevor Lawrence. In that stretch, 11.67 targets per game, 36.1% target share, 98.83 receiving yards per game, and 0.83 touchdowns per game. En route to 22.9 PPR points per game down the stretch. Now, I'm a little bit more optimistic in the sense that I think Travis Hunter from day one is going to be more of a factor than you do. So that would be for me, like why I would have him at 8 I actually have Brian Thomas Jr. as my wide receiver 7. We'll talk about my 8 and 9 in a second, but that's why I have Brian Thomas Jr. as my wide receiver 7, as opposed to maybe the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 that I maybe wanted to put him at prior to them drafting Travis Hunter. The reason why I can't rank him above Nico, above Puka, even above Malik Nabers. I mean, you remember what I was saying about Brian Thomas Jr. going into the NFL draft, is that's just how much I believe in Travis Hunter. I think all these other guys very clearly are superstars, like Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's a superstar level talent, but I think there's actually the possibility that Brian Thomas Jr. is the second most talented receiver on his team. And again,
that doesn't exist for Collins, doesn't exist for Nabers, and maybe it exists a little bit for Puka, but probably more likely only exists for Thomas in this year.
And this is full praise for Travis Hunter. Like I legitimately consider Brian Thomas Jr. like a fringe top 6, top 7, top 8 overall wide receiver talent in the league. That is me gassing Travis Hunter. I mean, we'll talk about him later in the video, but that's me gassing Travis Hunter, thinking if he hits his ceiling, like we're looking at Odell Beckham Jr. reincarnated.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to make the case for Hunter when we get to him because everyone's heard you make it 67 times.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get a little bit of a different talk in there. But Collins, the last guy of this tier, feel very comfortable with him as an anchor wide receiver one as well. Even though I'm a little bit lower just generally on the Texans offense, I don't love the offensive line situation. I think Nico Collins, if he's not moved around the formation more, which is definitely something they should do to try and get him some more favorable looks, they might have a hard time passing the ball consistently, especially downfield. But Collins is the clear number one. Christian Kirk will help move the chains, but he's not really threatening Collins' target share. Jaden Higgins is another outside big body, but again, not really threatening Collins' target share. And when Nico was healthy, I mean, we saw what happened when he was out of the gate, 23 points per game those first couple of weeks of the season. And then once everyone decided to fall, in the Texans offense, Tank Dell goes down, Stephon Diggs goes down, he was still commanding high-level target share. Basically producing at like 19 plus points per game when he was healthy, if you remove his games that he wasn't on the field for.
And then that's the thing for me with Nico. The reason why I would have him over BTJ is I think they're probably, comparable in terms of their talent levels. Big X wide receivers, speed can contribute, can separate at all three levels. The difference, of course, is there is no Travis Hunter for the Texans. And I actually do think having another receiver now, like you said, with Jaden Higgins that has the size profile to play on the boundary. Like Nico Collins has only ever profiled as an X boundary wide receiver. And last year, were you going to play Stephon Diggs at X given his advanced age? Were you going to play a 165-pound soaking wet Tank Dell at that X wide receiver position? Probably not. I can convince myself the team thinks, hey, I'm going to draft Jaden Higgins, 6'4", 220 pounds. Sure, maybe Nico Collins is still going to play the majority of his snaps on the outside, but just having access to that type of frame for another look, if you want to move Nico inside out, it has another factor of versatility that they didn't have last year.
Yeah, which is exactly the argument I just made for BTJ too, is that they can move him around the formation now with Hunter there, and De'Ami Brown can be a sacrificial X down the field. So all of these guys, anchor wide receiver, hero wide receiver type of dudes. Moving into the next year, we have Drake London of the Falcons, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions, AJ Brown of the Eagles, and Ladd Mcconkey of the Chargers. Now, they are technically in the same tier, but I don't know about you. I feel like Ladd Mcconkey is a minor mini tier behind these guys, to the point that, like, let's say I was picking at the 106 and these guys all got taken off the board and I had to take Ladd Mcconkey. I wouldn't feel like I'm getting the end of a tier. I would feel like I'm kind of like, it kind of sucks that AJ and St. Brown and London and maybe the running backs or somebody else would dry up before that point. I don't know if you feel that way, but that's just kind of how I feel about Mcconkey versus the other guys.
Well, I do that about AJ and Ladd Mcconkey. I think Drake London and Amon-Ra St. Brown, there would be no world where I take AJ or Mcconkey over either of them.
Okay, yeah, that's a difference between the two of us. I think there's a world in which I could take AJ Brown over London and over St. Brown as well. I mean, London, we can go through quickly as the first option here. Wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game this past season, 16.5 points per game. At 23 years old, like, I think people assume that Drake London, okay, kind of is what he is at this point. Dude was super young last year, man. He was a 21-year-old rookie 3 years ago. And Michael Penix Jr., once he became the starter, he kind of showed that really high ceiling down the stretch for Drake London, 19.32 PPR points per game. And the Zach Robinson offense now potentially without Darnell Mooney for a significant period of time. I think London has legit like 30+% target share written all over him.
Well, I actually had, so in the games that he fully started, because keep in mind, like, he made like spot appearances at times, but in the games he fully started, which was week 16 through 18 of the Michael Penix experience, we saw Drake London be an absolute target alpha in that stretch. And on top of that, I mean, we'll talk about the status of Darnell Mooney in a second, labeled as week to week. The quote from Raheem Morris was, "We're hopeful he'll play this year." Like, that's not what you want to hear about your number 2 wide receiver 3 weeks from the season starting. But in that stretch with Michael Penix, 13 targets per game, 38.8% target share, 7.33 receptions per game, 117.33 receiving yards per game, and 23.1 PPR points per game. Is it at all possible? And I mentioned this to you, Corey, before we started recording, that last year, Puka Nabers was kind of the guy where, like, okay, he's attached to an offense we liked, but is he really that superstar level talent? Is he a top 5, top 6 level guy in the league? And we kind of saw Puka take that next step as a player. Yeah. Drake London can very well be that guy this year. Drake London can be that guy that we're viewing as a wide receiver 8 to 12 talent-wise right now, that maybe next year it's like, holy crap, he just had 125 catches, 1,600 yards, and 12 touchdowns.
Yeah, and London and Puka are actually the same age too. So it's Puka obviously was 2 draft classes later or draft class later or whatever. But yeah, him and London basically the same age there. So yeah, I feel really good about London. St. Brown, I specifically have moved down since you already had him here kind of the whole time.
I've always been a hater.
Yeah, I mean, St. Brown, I absolutely love still. I think the tie breaks for me of why I have him a little bit lower than I usually do is that even though he's been wide receiver 4 in back-to-back years, 18.5 PPR points per game, at least 115 for 1250 and 10 touchdowns in back-to-back years as well. St. Brown has been a wide receiver 2 or better in 27 of his last 33 games. He's the absolute model of consistency. But without Ben Johnson there, we've heard stuff like they want to stretch the field more. They want to push the ball downfield. I talked about it when we brought up Jameson Williams in the mid-round guys that we're betting our lives on. I think that this target hierarchy could go from St. Brown gets 170 plus and JMO gets barely 100 to St. Brown gets 150 plus and JMO gets 125 plus, where it starts to tighten up a little bit more. Similar to what we said about kind of BTJ having a really good wide receiver in his core. I think JMO's an ascending player. And I think stylistically, the way that they want to run their offense might change a little bit without Ben Johnson. And St. Brown is coming off of like a little knee cleanup procedure, which makes me a tiny, tiny bit spooked about his health as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned on the running back video, Jahmyr Gibbs deserves more targets. You just mentioned it with Jameson Williams. Sam Laporta
down the stretch. Sam Laporta
again.
was getting targeted too, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he's back to being an integral part of the offense.
This is the opposite of a concentrated target situation. I mean, hell, even again, I don't factor this into my analysis when I'm on St. Brown, but like you're even hearing, the Lions hyping up Isaac Tesla at a camp. It's like there are a lot more relevant wide receivers in this Lions offense than maybe there was 2022, 2023, and even last year for the most part, because like you said, with Sam Laporta being banked up, Jahmyr Gibbs only 63 targets last year. I think that's almost a foregone conclusion going to go up. How do you give Jahmyr Gibbs that skill set who produced 517 yards on 63 targets, another sub 70 target season? I just think philosophically, because Ben Johnson's gone, John Morton will have to trust these guys. John Morton will have to get these guys the ball in space because you're not getting the same scheme advantage like you were with Ben Johnson. Again, John Morton can very well be a solid offensive coach. Ben Johnson was the best one on the market.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Goff, if anybody watched the quarterback doc, he was actually middle of the season. He was kind of banged up, like his ankle kind of got rolled up on or whatever. And if you look at the stretch of games that he played after he did that, he was a lot more conservative, just kind of peppering Amon-Ra St. Brown with a lot of those targets. And Jameson Williams' best production kind of came before that injury and then well after that injury when he was well recovered beyond that point. And I think if Goff stays upright and he's able to move and he's able to stand in and take hits or whatever, he's going to hold the ball a little bit longer and try and get the ball more to Jameson Williams. But I still feel great about St. Brown. I guess the best way I can describe him is I would love to get him in round 2. And I would also love him to be my wide receiver 2, potentially, if I grabbed, Nico or Nabers or Nakua or something in the first round. And then on the turn, if I'm picking, let's say 109 or 110 or 111, grabbing St. Brown with my second pick, I feel like feels really good in PPR leagues, having him as like your second receiver.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Looking back at this now, I kind of wish we did do a double hero strategy because if you're at the 111, 112, and you pair 2 of these wide receivers, knowing, like we said, that you can get creative at running back round 3, rounds 4, rounds 5, given the current climate, like you could legitimately start your draft given current ADP with like Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown at the 3rd round. Maybe you want to pivot. You want to take a quarterback there because Jaden Daniels fell. You pair him up with an Amara Hampton or a Breece Hall, and then Trevion Henderson somehow flips to you at that 5-6 turn.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in the 9-12 video. As a potential double hero wide receiver strategy that you can employ there. The other 2 guys that we should touch on here before we move on to the next tier is AJ Brown and Ladd Mcconkey. AJ Brown's very straightforward, been a wide receiver 1 in points per game 4 of his last 5 seasons. The Eagles, yes, have low pass volume, but that's already accounted for in this price tag because AJ Brown would be a first round pick if the Eagles had thrown 525 times or more last year. It sucks that his ceiling is dependent on a Devonta Smith injury or something that we can't really project right now at this current moment, which is that the Eagles would throw the ball a lot more. But the chaos of an NFL season, you never know where pass volume is going to come from. And at the very least, if A.J. Brown's floor basically last year was where he's being drafted right now, then he's probably a decent selection.
I mean, if you were collecting a team on the playground to play against the aliens in a battle for Earth, he would be one of the first 4 wide receivers brought up to be on that team.
Yeah, you can't go wrong taking one of I can make the argument of all the players going in round 2 of fantasy drafts, he's the most talented player. So it's like, what are you going to go wrong taking the best player, especially when he's on an 11.5 win over under team?
He's the safest projection in this range. The reason why I have him closer to Ladd Mcconkey than you do is that it just hasn't materialized into the 18, 19, 20 plus point per game ceiling. And again, I think the talent is there to be
There's
that
been stretches of it, but it just
hasn't been
done
stretches
over
of
a
it.
Full season.
It's just, yeah, his peak ceiling, again, keep in mind, we're talking about, I believe, what, a 28-year-old receiver now, or is he 27?
I think he's still 27, but I'd have to look right now.
So he's either 27 or 28, and he just hasn't crossed 18 points per game. Like, I feel confident in saying he's going to finish as a back-end wide receiver 1. I just don't know if you have the wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 2 overall in his range of outcomes.
Yeah, he's 28 years old, barely right now. And yeah, he's been 17.7, 17.6, 17.0, and 16.7 PPR points per game. 4 of his last 5 years, a top 12 receiver, all 4 of those 5 seasons, top 8 receiver and a top 6 receiver, 2 and 3, or 2 and 1 of those seasons, respectively. My thing is this: when it breaks right for AJ Brown, I want to be there. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't know when it's going to happen necessarily, but if for some reason he gets 550 pass attempts out of the Eagles' passing volume this year, he's going to absolutely destroy his ADP.
I'm saying this as a joke because I know you're going to be like, well, you can't compare the talent level of AJ Brown to this guy, but brother, I said that for 3 years about Kyle Pitts. When the year happens, it'll happen, but yeah, it's got to happen.
Hey, if you're getting, again, he's going wide receiver, basically where he's being drafted, which is like wide receiver 10, wide receiver 11, wide receiver 12. If that's what you're going to get him on a median projection, he's probably a good pick, because if things do break right for him, he's going to absolutely crush. Like I said, Ladd Mcconkey, wide receiver 16 in PPR points per game last year. I guess maybe some people are worried about the Keenan Allen signing. Maybe we should address that, because Ladd Mcconkey was the kind of like the chain mover over the middle target, and Keenan Allen and Herbert obviously have a very strong connection that dates back multiple years. I could hear arguments for somebody to say, hey, before I was taking Ladd Mcconkey ahead of that group of running backs, like the Chase Browns, the Bucky Irvings, the Jonathan Taylors, those type of guys. But now after this Keenan Allen signing, I'm taking Ladd Mcconkey after those group of running backs. I could hear arguments for that, but that's about the furthest I would go with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair way to approach it. Like, if you wanted to take a Jonathan Taylor or a Bucky Irving,
like I have Chase Brown ranked over him.
Oh, yeah, no, I easily do. I'm more so saying like maybe Chase Brown's gone, because like Chase Brown would be a given. I'd take Chase Brown over AJ Brown as well. But even like lower on, like I still have Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, like relatively close to Ladd Mcconkey. I do have Ladd Mcconkey a couple spots higher, but if you wanted to take those running backs over him, I wouldn't blink. Yeah, Keenan Allen is brought in, but at the same time, Ladd Mcconkey showed he could separate at all 3 levels. He could separate on the outside. He could separate from the slot. Yes, he was better in the slot, you could say, as a rookie, but at the same time, year 2 progression for a guy that is as good of a separator as he is. Why can't he take that level of ascension? Why can't he be considered a top 8, top 7 overall wide receiver after the year? Because based off how he finished it, people are already making the case, like out of all the route runners, out of all the separators in the league, like Ladd Mcconkey is in that rarefied air.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's already up there as one of the best receivers in football. So I think that's part of why he might be a value in like home leagues. Like I think there's going to be home leagues where he falls to the 2-3 turn. He doesn't go in the mid-second round like he goes on Underdog. Maybe even people are getting him at like 303 or something like that in home leagues, because Ladd Mcconkey, like we talked about this last year, like people didn't want to draft him because he's like, you know, people called him like the next Cooper Kupp or whatever. Like there's a real possibility that you get a nice discount on him because of the Keenan Allen signing. I really do think that casuals might think that the Keenan Allen signing is a major deal.
It's so funny because every comp that people had for Ladd was just some white, unathletic slot wide receiver. It's like, dude, this guy ran a fucking 4.39. Like, are we watching?
Yeah, stylistically, his comps were Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, as we talked about during the draft process. Those were exactly like athletically who his comps were, but people didn't want to do that because you know he looked, oh, he's Wes Welker. It's like, no, he's not.
Maybe Ladd Mcconkey might actually be one of the better values in drafts, because Garrett Wilson was going in the first round last year when we knew he was having a geriatric Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. Like if you plugged Garrett Wilson last year, which is, like, again, it's a solid comp for Ladd Mcconkey. If you plugged in Garrett Wilson with Justin Herbert, I'm sure the narrative on the season would have looked different.
Oh yeah, no, I bet. And don't get me too excited talking about how Garrett Wilson would have actually hit last year. But yeah, no, you can make the argument in casual leagues. I'm telling you, there's gonna be people who submit teams to us that say they got Ladd Mcconkey in the 3rd round. Like I'm telling you, it's gonna happen because people are maybe worried about the Keenan situation. This next year, guys, you guys are gonna be like, oh, you only have 2 receivers in the 3rd round. Well, the 3rd round, there's a large portion of quarterbacks that we love there. The top 4 elite quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels,
Kittle,
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, respectively. And then we also do love a good amount of running backs in that territory, as we talked about in yesterday's video, with Amari Hampton, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams. I actually have James Cook at 30 at the tail end of the 3rd round as well. So there's a lot of good running backs, a lot of good wide receivers, or a lot of good quarterbacks, and I have both Trey McBride and Brock Bowers on that 2-3 turn. So for us, we look at the hit rates of wide receivers in the 3rd round. It's not usually a great group. T. Higgins and Marvin Harrison do stand out as like maybe a slight mini tier ahead of like the Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson next group of guys. And it's mainly just because T. Higgins does have the wide receiver 5 in points per game, a top 5 receiver in points per game last year, 18.5 in 2024, despite Jamar Chase being the triple crown, he still produced at that level. And then Harrison, while he hasn't proven it yet, he absolutely, you could make the argument that if we like kind of wiped people's memories clean, we could be taking this guy in the second round, no problem, just based on what kind of prospect he was, how he kind of projects, and that kind of thing. It's just that people have the sting of him being drafted earlier last year and kind of disappointing people.
Well, we've mentioned this so many times in the strategy video. So if you're watching these rankings, you'll understand why we have wide receiver ranked this way. We've said all offseason, like once this range of wide receiver hits, like genuinely, what is the difference between the guys that are currently going in round 3 versus your Devonta Smiths versus your George Pickens, your Tetairoa McMillans, your like all the guys on that 4 or 5 turn, mid-5th even area. Like realistically, too, you can even stretch that down. I mean, we'll talk about, the Rome Odunze area even. Like you could very well make the case that Rome Odunze, his ceiling range of outcome, it's not all that dissimilar to some of the wide receivers that are currently going in round 3.
Yeah, you could make the argument that him and Harrison project similarly. Like I would hear arguments for that. And Harrison, as much as I like him in this territory, definitely has some things that he needs to overcome. He's got to play better. He's got to, Kyler's got to play a little bit better as well. The only other argument that I would have here is that I have Tyreek Hill in this territory. Like I have him ranked at the early portion of the 3rd round. And the reason for it is, if I'm willing to take the risk on Christian McCaffrey getting back to his kind of like old ways, I'm willing to do it on Tyreek Hill as well. Last year, obviously, I'm not going to deny that he had his lowest yards per route run of his career. He had his lowest PFF receiving grade of his career. Probably a top 2 fantasy wide receiver of the last 5 to 7 years, though. Like legitimately, even in 2023 and 2022, we were talking about Tyreek Hill as potentially the 1st, 2nd, 3rd overall pick off the board. So I know the vibes have been terrible. I know he was really bad last year, but he was solid with Tua. And I just think that a lot of it is just like mental dejection. As long as Tyreek Hill has got his head on straight, which is absolutely a risk, I do think he can really pay off like a 3rd round price tag.
Once an older wide receiver shows you signs of decline, you usually should listen. 12.84 PPR points per game.
That's true of Davante Adams for what it's worth.
True of Davante Adams when he had over 17 PPR points per game last year.
His so when I broke down the end is near for these dynasty wide receivers video, Davante Adams separated versus zone coverage at like a 30th percentile rate when he had been previously like a 95th percentile plus separator, and his like receiving grade and some of those other metrics had downtrodden a little bit too.
Sure, that's part of it, but Davante Adams, when he was at his worst stretch, was still a 15.6 PPR point per game scorer and scored as the wide receiver 14. That is his worst season. Like, there's no denying that Tyreek Hill's bad is objectively far worse than what Davante Adams has been in the past. And the vibes are horrible, man. Like, I just don't want to deal with this situation. I don't want to hitch my wagon to a guy that is in decline and an offense that we don't believe in nearly as much as we did last year, 2 years ago. And I still think there's a possibility that we could be talking about Jaylen Waddle being ahead of Tyreek Hill at some point in the season.
Very valid. Very valid. I think that's absolutely a valid case. The only thing that I would push back on is Tyreek was not healthy last year. He was dealing with a wrist injury. If, let's say, after like week 8 or week 9, he had gotten shut down for the year. Let's say they shut him down because Tua was banged up and all that kind of stuff. Because people, I don't know if you remember last year, people were talking about that they could shut him down for the year. Let's say that happened. Is Tyreek Hill going higher or lower in fantasy drafts right now if he had gotten shut down in week 8 last year?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure because he kept playing. And again,
I think him playing through that made his fall off look more evident. If he had been shut down, I think he'd be going in the mid-2nd round.
But your finger doesn't affect your route running. Like your finger doesn't affect your legs.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. I'm just saying, like, it did affect his ability to catch the football, which affects your ability to get yards and yards per out run and touchdowns and big plays and all that kind of stuff.
I'll be honest, I didn't notice it as much as a catch point. I just was seeing a guy that was one of the best separators in the NFL at his absolute climax not be able to separate at certain points last year. I saw Tyreek Hill being taken out of games. I have never seen Tyreek Hill being taken out of games before.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting the bear and the bull case right now. This is exactly a dilemma that people are going to have with Tyreek Hill. There's people that are probably willing to take him in the 2nd round still. I know some of my league mates have hinted that they might even take him before me on the 1-2 turn because, you never get Tyreek Hill this low. And there's going to be leagues where he goes really high because of that name value. But for me, if you can get him in the early 3rd round, I do think it's worth the risk at that point. Just the same way that you're getting Christian McCaffrey kind of in the late 1st round. I think it's baked in at that point what the risk is relative to what the upside is for both of those two players.
I guess it's just my issue is like it's incongruent comparing the running back to the wide receiver because the running back, as we know, like will inherently gain value with touches. with Tyreek Hill, like he's still got to earn his targets. I guess that's my fallback on it. Because I mean, you remember where I was at earlier.
Older running back versus older wide receiver is inherently a worse bet.
Sure, but I'm just saying it's a volume-based position. Like, sure, like on the holistic point of the year, like if you're worried about Christian McCaffrey missing time, Tyreek Hill missing time, I'm also saying like Tyreek Hill's fall off will result in him actually getting less looks. Like Christian McCaffrey could be less efficient as a player, but still touch the ball 18 times a game and be very, very relevant in fantasy.
Yeah, and I think for both guys at the beginning of the season, you feel like you'll probably get some return on ADP, and you can maybe sell high for, you know, a younger player that you feel better about down the stretch. Let's group some guys together because I think there's two groups of guys that make sense. Mike Evans and Davante Adams are both older receivers. Adams projects right now as the number 2 receiver, and Matthew Stafford, this whole situation, as we mentioned with Puka, I would have Adams probably closer to like the 3-4 turn because I actually have him about a mid 4th round pick right now, but he would be closer to like maybe the late 3rd round area if I knew Matthew Stafford was fully healthy and ready to go. And even you can make the argument that that's even still too low for what Davante Adams represents. So of the two of them, I prefer Mike Evans because he's healthy, he's ready to go. Chris Godwin is not going to start the season probably playing full games for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Emeka Egbuka is a rookie. So I do think that you're going to get a really nice start out of Mike Evans, and we know that he's like the high volume, high value touches guy. Red zone, big plays, all that kind of stuff. So between the two of them, I do prefer Mike Evans more so on the 3-4 turn, whereas Adams I have in the mid 4th.
Yeah. And the difference for us in our rankings, again, we haven't touched upon Garrett Wilson in a bit. We'll touch upon him in a bit.
Well, Wilson and Smith-Njigba I was going to group together because they're very similar bets to me.
And we'll talk about them in a second. So you said you had Tyreek Hill 25. I have him at 44 for the people that are watching at home. Davante Adams, I have as my 32nd overall player. You said you have him at 45.
Yeah, I can double check one more time, but I think 45 is where I got him.
Yeah, and who's the other one? Jaxon Smith-Njigba will group with Garrett Wilson. So, we talked about it with Tyreek Hill. I feel confident in saying that I would prefer Davante Adams to Tyreek Hill because I'm confident in saying that Davante Adams is still a very good football player. That's it. Like realistically, they both have their concerns. One of their concerns doesn't have to do with them; it has to do with the health of their quarterback, which is a concern. But I don't have the concern of Davante Adams falling off as a player that I do Tyreek Hill. Matthew Stafford's back injury, like if that keeps being negative, I'll drop him even more. Like I've already baked it into my rankings, having him at 32 overall. But if Matthew Stafford's healthy, like I think Davante Adams can very well outscore T. Higgins straight up.
He can. You're right. I don't disagree with you at all, but we're pretending that Tyreek had some seismic fall off and Davante Adams didn't. Davante Adams 37th percentile separation versus zone coverage. Tyreek Hill 70th percentile separation versus zone coverage. Adams was better versus man coverage. But I don't know. To me, they both are the same level of fall off risk and the ceiling because Tyreek's the number 1 of his offense. And schematically, I do still think that Mike McDaniel knows what he's doing at scheming up these receivers and stuff. They're a very similar bet. It's wild that we have such a large discrepancy between where I have Tyreek versus Adams and where you have Tyreek versus where you have Adams. We'll see who ends up winning. Maybe we'll have a little bet on who decides to
Adams versus Tyreek.
Adams versus Tyreek. I'd be down for that. But let's talk about the young guys in this territory. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson. Both high volume number 1 receivers. I think you believe a lot more in the Seahawks offense than you do in the Jets offense. But I think Cooper Kupp is more significant target competition than anybody in New York. So that's kind of where it balances each other out a little bit. I don't know. Do you have a significant lean here? Is there one guy that you're like, absolutely all day I'm taking JSN over Wilson or Wilson over JSN?
I'm taking JSN over Wilson. Garrett Wilson had over 150 targets last year, and he was the wide receiver 23 in points per game. And I would argue his target quality got worse.
Yeah, I think you can argue his target quality got worse. I keep doing the thing where I'm like, I think it's just a vibes thing, man. Like, I really do think that even if the target quality in like our minds should be worse because Rodgers is a better passer than Fields. I think the fact that these guys have played together going back to their Ohio State days, the fact that Rodgers is not being a complete and utter prick of a human being to the whole offense whenever someone makes a mistake. I honestly just think Wilson's going to end up playing better back to his standard of 2022 and 2023 because he doesn't have Rodgers to deal with anymore. So I actually think that, yeah, you could make the argument JSN projects better just given that they're probably both going to be high volume guys and Darnold's a better passer than Fields. But I think Wilson might be a tier of talent better than JSN as a player, assuming he gets back to that level.
I mean, like I would say Garrett Wilson, I would take as a receiver, and I'd probably agree with that. I honestly just trust the situation with Seattle, trust the situation with Clint Kubiak.
As you should. It's a better schedule, better pass volume, better scheme. Like, I mean, like we don't know what to expect from the Jets right now, but I think a lot of us don't expect much.
Yeah, the way I mean, I've mentioned this to you, but I mean, the way that we were excited about, like, obviously Chris Olave ended up suffering his injuries, but what we were excited about Chris Olave being treated as that number one wide receiver, being used in a more varied perspective. I see JSN being able to take that step in year 3. Now, hopefully he doesn't have the concussion issues that Olave had, because we should be having a completely different conversation about Olave at this point.
Olave should be in this tier if he was healthy last year, to be honest.
Possibly higher.
Yeah, but yeah, potentially. I mean, he's got Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler, so he'd probably be in this territory. But yeah, those guys are an interesting discussion, man. JSN versus Wilson. Let us know in the comments what you guys think of that, because I do think they're very similar projections. Again, you're probably getting more pass volume with JSN, but you're also dealing with Cooper Kupp, and whatever you think of him would factor in. Xavier Worthy is the other guy that is in this tier. Definitely, I would say an elevated rating from us versus the rest of probably the consensus. So we might have to explain ourselves in totality here, because I don't think a lot of people would have Xavier Worthy this high. But we're kind of baking in a 4 to 6 game suspension for Rashee Rice, I would say, given this ranking of Xavier Worthy. We haven't had official word come out about that yet. But Xavier Worthy down the stretch last year was producing at a super, super high level. You think of the Super Bowl, you think of the playoff run that he ended up posting in Kansas City. And then you look at what Xavier Worthy can do this year when Kansas City's got a healthy Patrick Mahomes, got a healthy Kelsey, got a healthy Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice once he gets back from injury. I think this offense will just take a large step. And I think those long plays that we didn't really see connect until the playoffs will connect a lot more at the beginning of the season this year with Worthy.
Yeah, I mean, I have Xavier Worthy straight up ranked higher than Tyreek Hill. Like, we talked about this before the show started. Like, to me, you're betting on Patrick Mahomes getting back to that volume level. Currently number 2, tied for number 2 with Dak Prescott in odds to lead the league in passing yards. If he's going to do that with Rashee Rice missing 4 to 6 games, it's because Xavier Worthy has taken a huge step as a player. And we both thought, down the stretch in the Super Bowl, in the playoffs, like, Xavier Worthy was always the type of player where it might take him a while to figure out the NFL speed, to figure out how the NFL works. But once he does, not many players have that type of tangible skill set.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I have Worthy over Adams. So obviously, going back to our conversation, you're low on Hill, I'm low on Adams. So I have Worthy over Adams. So it kind of adds up.
Wide receiver 16 for me.
Yeah, I have him. I don't have him quite that high. I have him wide receiver 18. So you probably have him over Wilson and Evans too, I would imagine.
Over Wilson and Evans. And once we go into the next tier, I'll explain who my wide receiver 17 and 18 are. But
yeah, I'm sure Hunter is probably one of them. I'm surprised you have him over Evans. That's one that I'm a little shocked by. I personally can't get there over Evans with Worthy.
Yeah, I'm sipping the Kool-Aid, brother.
Yeah, you're sipping the Kool-Aid. I can get it with Wilson. I just think Evans is a little bit safer, and it's still a really good offense there. But let's move into the next tier. Travis Hunter, Tetairoa, Mcmillan, Devonta Smith, George Pickens, Terry McLaurin, Jaylen Waddle, and Jameson Williams. A lot of really good number 2 receivers here. I mean, these are some of the best number 2s in the league. Hunter, one of the best number 2s in the league. Devonta Smith, one of the best number 2s. George Pickens up there. Jaylen Waddle, Jameson Williams. A lot of great number 2 receivers here. One thing I want to make a case for Hunter, because everybody, hears you make the case for him all the time. The thing that I'm really excited about Hunter is that the message has been the same since the very second they drafted him. They said offense first, defense moonlight. That's what they said from the very beginning. We heard it officially with Liam Cohen saying 80% of the snaps on the Rich Eisen show. On the depth charts, the unofficial depth charts or whatever, it's Travis Hunter, first string wide receiver, second string cornerback. The drumbeat has been the same the whole time for Travis. And as we talked about with BTJ, we love what Liam Cohen is capable of doing. We think Trevor Lawrence is probably going to just hone in on these 2 guys and these 2 guys alone. And De'Ami Brown's going to be running some wind sprints for the most part.
Yeah, I have him aggressively ranked. He's my wide receiver 17. We'll talk about T-Mac in a second. He's coming in at 18. I really believe in T-Mac as well, but I'll simplify it with Travis Hunter like this. He's the type of player who at some point in his NFL career, I think has the upside to be regarded as the best wide receiver in football. If I view that as being his talent level, I have to draft him. Like, I have to draft him, because even if he starts off slow, because people might say, oh, maybe he starts off slow. Fine. If BTJ also were to ever miss time from an implied upside perspective,
yeah, he could cry. I mean, that's true of every number 2 in this situation.
Not like this, though. Not like this, because that would mean
Smith with no AJ and Hunter with no BTJ would go blow for blow as elite receivers.
Disagree. I mean, we can make it another implied bet. If anything were to happen to both AJ and Brian Thomas Jr., Hunter versus Smitty straight up, because. Dude, if you're telling me,
because I have a lot of BTJ.
Hopefully not.
And AJ.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Again, we're making implied bets. That's how you know we're sickos. So, going back to Travis Hunter, the talent is there. the ability on all three levels of the field, the yards after catch ability, everything we're hearing, 80+% of the offensive snaps, first team offense, second team defense. Like, dude, I don't want to miss out on this guy. If I have to be above market, wherever market is at, I will do so. So even though the market's rising on
market, brother, I'm smoking the market.
Dude, and I'm fine being way above market. If I have to take this guy in the mid 4th round, because I know there's the upside, he could be the best wide receiver in football someday, I don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. And you would have been absolutely correct in that statement if you ranked Jamar Chase as a top 18 receiver his rookie season. And people, I don't know exactly where his ADP was, but it was probably in the wide receiver like 20 to 24, 25 range, give or take, for Jamar as a rookie. So yeah, I mean, Hunter, as good of a prospect, honestly, as Jamar was, especially on tape. So it's so funny because like I have Travis Hunter wide receiver 21, which is extremely aggressive considering his ADP is wide receiver 31. But because you have him like wide receiver 16 or whatever you have him at, it looks like I'm a hater of Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I have Worthy at 16. Hunter's one spot behind. I can't quite do it over Worthy because Rice is going to be missing with the suspension, and I think Worthy with Mahomes is going to have a ton of upside in his own right. But dude, like wherever I have to draft Travis Hunter,
I think you should probably have him over Worthy, given your opinion of Hunter personally.
And maybe, but if I have to take Travis Hunter ahead of market, I will.
Yeah. I mean, you got him over Wilson and Evans, I'm assuming, as well.
Wilson and Evans. We'll talk about T-Mac in a second, but one spot ahead of T-Mac. T-Mac, somebody could just argue, well, like, you know, you got the security that he will play 100% of the offense, whereas Travis Hunter, more of a mystery box, even though we both believe it's not actually a mystery box. Everything we've heard from the Jags, it's not a mystery box. If someone wants to say Tetairoa Mcmillan is the safer projection this year because we know exactly what we're getting from day one, a number one wide receiver on his team, that's fine, because I really do like Tetairoa Mcmillan, and I have him at wide receiver 18. We already saw him have that chemistry with Bryce Young in that first preseason game. We're watching Tetairoa Mcmillan. Hey, spoiler alert. Hey, you nerds out there, he could separate. He can actually separate. I didn't know. It must have been an unknown. I'm sure you guys know now, because Tetairoa Mcmillan can separate. He looked like a young Drake London on that field.
Yeah, no, he absolutely did. I mean, he kind of ran a TikTok route in the red zone there, but I do think you feel so good about it. I can make the argument, for what it's worth, that T-Mac should be ahead of Travis Hunter, because I think you can absolutely make the argument that Bryce Young is a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence, and T-Mac's number one, and Brian Thomas Jr. does not exist in Carolina.
I wouldn't, and I like Canales, but he ain't Liam Cohn. I mean, you can compare that as a Bucs fan.
I mean, he's not, but it wasn't that far off.
I mean, we saw Baker Mayfield fucking absolutely crush previous career.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that the Carolina Panthers have that the Jags don't, which is that, you know, the run game is more consistent in Carolina, the offensive line's better.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, again, they're wide receiver 17 and 18. You want to take T-Mac? Sure. I just think Travis Hunter has break fantasy football level upside given his talent. I think Tetairoa Mcmillan is another extremely talented player, but there's just a different level of ceiling. Like, if I think Tetairoa Mcmillan is like a Drake London level talent, I'm talking Travis Hunter, Odell Beckham Jr., Justin Jefferson.
And I'll talk about my guys that I have ranked a little bit more aggressively in this tier than you do, and then you can kind of do the same, because I think it's going to work out perfectly that you have Pickens and Waddle ranked more aggressively than I do, and I have Smith and Mclaurin ranked more aggressively, and then I think we're both kind of right in line on Jameson and Williams. So Smitty is my highest drafted player, period, on Underdog. I've drafted him over 33% of my teams because I think he is the most mispriced fantasy asset on the board right now. I've talked about it on numerous occasions. Eagles, more pass volume. That is where I'm at with it. Devonta Smith is going to be a huge beneficiary of that. Him being a wide receiver 15 in points per game guy and now being drafted wide receiver 28 after a historically low pass volume season, in which I don't think that'll continue, because we've talked about it with Barkley already. We don't think he's going to be nearly as dominant as he was in 2024. So Devonta Smith with more pass volume, and again, the implied upside, if anything happens to AJ, if the defense suffers some injuries, if Saquon goes down, something like that, I think the upside for Devonta Smith, as it has been wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20, wide receiver 15 the last 3 seasons. And now he's being drafted wide receiver 28 on an 11.5 win football team with, you know, Super Bowl aspirations yet again. I just don't buy it. And with Terry, I know you're going to be a little bit lower on him. I think he's just a little bit better of a real life receiver than you do. That was something we talked about pre-show. Terry McLaurin had 13 touchdowns last year. I don't expect that to continue, because that is a big time outlier for the rest of his career. But at the same time, you got a young superstar quarterback that both of us absolutely love going into year 2. I do think that, you know, the baseline of 4,000 passing yards, 30 plus passing touchdowns exists for Jaden Daniels, and maybe even more. And McLaurin can be efficient given the legs and, you know, stuff that Jaden Daniels represents from like a matchup perspective. So I just want pieces of good offenses. And I think Mclaurin is almost like with the James Cook discussion we had in the running back video. Mclaurin is kind of like that for me in the wide receiver position, where it's like, I don't know how he gets there. I just want to bet on him because he's a good receiver on a really good team.
Care to guess how many seasons of 140 plus targets and or 1,200 plus receiving yards Terry McLaurin has?
I think it's 0. Yeah,
there's just better upside shots.
These are fair, but he also hasn't had a quarterback until last year, and his quarterback was a rookie.
Yeah, it's second least targets in the NFL last year, like in his career.
Yeah, no, valid points, man. Like I said, just like James Cook, you were like, dude, he doesn't get the snaps or the opportunities. I'm like, I don't disagree with you. I just think that I want to bet on this guy because he's in a good situation. So ultimately, I think Mclaurin probably doesn't have quite as high of a ceiling as some of the players in this territory. But I do think like he's probably a good returns on ADP type of investment.
And if that's the case, I mean, how many times do we coin silent killer running backs?
Well,
to me,
silent killers don't exist at wide receiver. And silent killer means you lost ADP, not gained it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. To me, Terry McLaurin is a silent killer wide receiver where we're drafting him basically about what he did last season off the back of knowing he scored 13 touchdowns. Like, that's what it feels like to me. Again, you don't have him where the market does, so I'm not worried about that. Like, you actually do have him slightly behind market like I do. But, I mean, there's just other upside shots I like better. Like, George Pickens attached to an offense that's been #1 in expected wide receiver points the last couple of years. Quarterback that, Jaden Daniels, whether you take him above Dak, sure, go ahead. At the same time, when you're talking about a pure passing projection, Dak, we know, is going to give you 4,500 and 30 plus passing touchdowns. Well, we anticipate that Jaden Daniels will take that step. And on top of that, I mean, when we're talking
there's no Lamb in Washington, though.
Sure, but the offense is just going to throw the ball a ton more. That's basically the premise of it.
Yeah.
If the Bengals and Joe Burrow are going to throw the ball 650, 700 times, I would say the Cowboys are going to be somewhere between 600 and 625. So even on a 25% target share, you're just getting such an elite offensive situation. Who's the other guy that you
Waddle,
mentioned?
I think you were higher on than I am.
Yeah, Waddle.
Makes
I am
sense.
higher.
I mean, you're lower on Tyreek, so
yeah. I ended up recently moving Waddle a couple spots up, so he was initially wide receiver 26, wide receiver 27. I actually moved him ahead of McLaurin, so he's my wide receiver 25.
Yeah, I actually also have a wide receiver 25, so we're right in line on him. But I guess you're just lower on the Dolphins in general. I guess if you have Tyreek and Waddle respectively. Lower than I do. I feel pretty confident this offense.
I got more concerns with the Dolphins than you do. It's not that I'm lower on them per se. Like I'm lower that their offensive line is a mess and that we didn't see McDaniels adapt when things went south last year. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And then JMO, we're probably both right at the same spot. I have him wide receiver 23. Where do you have him?
27.
Okay, so I'm a little bit higher on JMO than you because I actually have him ahead of Pickens and Waddle. So I just, like I said with St. Brown, this is also kind of just the inverse case. Is like if I think the targets level out a little bit, then that means I need to have St. Brown and JMO closer together. So, and he finished wide receiver 23 last year, and I have him ranked wide receiver 23. And if I think the targets are going up, then that's probably a bullish signal for him.
Yeah, it's more so just a micro thing. Like we haven't talked about Courtland Sutton. I actually have Courtland Sutton also ranked ahead of Terry McLaurin. I just think it's
we can go right into it because I believe he's the second guy this tier, but we could talk about Sutton first if you want.
Yeah. I mean, the guy that's first in this tier, I actually have higher rank than both of them. I have Odunze as my wide receiver 24. I'm probably the one catering in the sense that why he's #1 here. I'm assuming you don't have him at 24.
No, I have of this tier, I have Odunze after Sutton, Metcalf, and Flowers.
Okay, so that's what, 28 for you, maybe?
He's
29.
Odunze is, where is he for me? He is 31 actually, and actually I have him below Rice as well.
You got to pump those numbers up, brother. All jokes aside, though, prototype X wide receiver, we believe in Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams taking the next step. Like I've made this case for the Bears offense all off season, and everything we have heard out of Chicago thus far has indicated that this guy is the wide receiver tone. This guy's going to be the guy that's going to be the leader in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, receptions. That is what we've been hearing all off season, and the fact that we got affirmation from Ben Johnson that he has taken that step as a second-year player. Odunze, by the way, top 10 level prospect in both of our grading cycles last year, our clear wide receiver 3 after Nabers and Harrison. The talent has never been the question mark. And we saw by the reception perception metrics that he was a better separator last year than maybe the production would have indicated. And I think a lot of that falls on Caleb Williams maybe not adjusting as a rookie and Shane Waldron being the absolute,
worst.
Grim Reaper.
Absolute woe.
Yeah.
Absolute woe. Yeah. No, I'll let you make the case for Odunze. I think the reason that I'm just a coward. I have him and DJ Moore at 31 and 32 respectively, and you have DJ Moore like very clearly. You're taking the stance that Odunze is the better pick, so that's kind of just the difference there. Sutton is Terry McLaurin light, as we just kind of made reference to. You said, oh, how many seasons Terry McLaurin had of 130 plus targets? Well, Sutton has one, and it was 135 last year. He also only has 1,100 yards. Well, he had 1,081 yards last year, but he has like one season of above 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns the last couple seasons. I just think that Sutton is very similar to McLaurin in the sense that, he's probably a small win, but he probably doesn't have like a super high ceiling. I just think that McLaurin is a better receiver, so I think that his ceiling is a little bit higher than Sutton's.
No bullshit. They're like the same bet. Like, I'm not even.
They are very similar. They are extremely similar bets. I just think that Sutton is like maybe the 30th best receiver in the league, like probably one of the weakest number ones in the league. Whereas McLaurin, I think, is like the 18th or 20th best receiver in the league.
Yeah, I think they're both weak number ones by any standards, anyways. Like, if realistically, if you have the 18th or the 21st or the 28th best receiver in the league as your number one, you're probably not a very good receiving corpse.
Yeah, no, there's levels to this shit here where you got like Terry McLaurin's a pretty weak number one. You have Sutton's a pretty weak number one, but 4 rounds later, Michael Pittman is kind of a similar bet to these guys. And that's who I end up drafting more often than not when I'm looking for like a small win. Like Michael Pittman goes like wide receiver 45. And I'm like, dude, this guy's probably going to finish like wide receiver 28.
Hey, you're quoting me from the Flock League. There's levels to this shit. And Nico is that top shit.
Yeah, no, for sure. Zay, I mean, everybody knows I love Zay Flowers. The only basis for me ranking him where I have him ranked, which is, where is he ranked for me? Wide receiver 27.
Let me guess. He's a good player.
Yeah, is that he's a really good player. And I guess there's some themes to my rankings, is that I don't really know how Terry gets there, but I just want to bet on a really good receiver on a really good team. I don't really know how Zay Flowers gets there, but I just want to bet on a really good receiver on a really good team. I just feel cozy and safe drafting these guys. And by safe, I don't mean that they don't have a ceiling. I just mean that I feel like I'm not taking as nearly as big of a risk as some of the other guys, where like Courtland Sutton, I just don't think he's that good. So I'm like, I don't want to draft this guy super high.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And it's funny when you see, because you mentioned you have Flowers where?
Wide receiver 27.
I have him at 31, and the guy he's one spot ahead of is like the complete inverse of the Zay Flowers theory, where it's like, no, like we're betting on upside here. You're betting on Flowers because you believe in the good player, but maybe the ceiling isn't the highest per se, given the volume of the offense. Like I have a Mcconkey at 32, where it's like the inverse. Like the passing volume is there. It's all the implied upside, but maybe he hasn't proven it like Flowers has so far.
Yeah, well, I just want to quickly, just for ease sake, take a look at our range of outcomes tool. And we have a tool in our thing where you can basically look at through the first 2 seasons of a guy's career. You can see kind of what his PPR points per game is, and then kind of like his comps for year 3 and whatnot. And you can see that some of these comps actually like are quite promising, like Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, those types of players. And given like reception perception data, he's like a 90th plus percentile separator. Like, I don't think it would be outrageous if Flowers put together like a 15 plus point per game season, a la a 3rd-year Stephon Diggs, a 3rd-year Brandon Ayuk. So I do think that is within the range of outcomes, especially when you factor in that like Lamar is just so good that he can carry players to it. And I know you would say, well, why didn't you do it last year or the year before that? It's like, well, he was still a young player. Like, he's still getting better. So maybe it's like, the stars align that Flowers kind of takes that jump, and then obviously Lamar will do his thing.
Yeah, it's just hoping you're betting on like, okay, Flowers, I know he's a good player. The volume has not been there. You admit the volume hasn't been there.
Touchdown volume and receiving volume overall has not been there. But I do love what I see when it comes to like yards per route run, reception perception, some of the things that are indicative of him of being a really good receiver, I think are great.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. I agree with you that he's a good player. It's just like, what's the caliber of good we're dealing with? Like, I think he's a comparable talent to like, George Pickens, Jaylen Waddle.
Well, that's
Jameson,
a whole tier ahead in our rankings, though.
Correct.
Correct. He also goes like about where those guys go. So again, if you prefer those guys, that's totally fine. But if they're off the board, you might get Zay Flowers more in that like 5th, 6th round area.
I'm talking about strict talent level, but like I said, the situation does limit him. You would think a 41 touchdown MVP level quarterback, but it is still low passing volume. And Lamar might be throwing for a ton of touchdowns, but when you're only catching 4 of them, does it really matter for my fantasy team?
Yeah, but again, I think that could go up just by him being more dominant, and he's a better part of the offense. They call it more first read plays for him because he's just a bigger part of the thing. I wish I had heard more buzz about him this offseason though. Like, hey, Flowers taking that step. He looks like a dude now. Like we haven't really heard that. So I have cooled my opinion on him just a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe part of it is I don't want to draft Zay Flowers when I'm making a very similar bet 3 rounds later on Josh Downs. 2
Yeah,
rounds
no,
later on
that's
Josh
totally
Downs.
fair. I think you can absolutely make the case that they're very similar bets. Metcalf, very clear number one receiver for the Steelers. I think that 150 plus targets is within his range of outcomes. He's been a wide receiver one before. The micro player take of it all is that we don't really trust Aaron Rodgers and we don't love the pass volume in Pittsburgh, but schematically, I think it makes sense. Play action, hit him over the top, that kind of thing. So Metcalf's a solid bet. I just think he's more of like a double. You're not probably going to get a super big home run. Like there was a point in the offseason where I was like, is this Stephon Diggs from 2020 when he moved to Buffalo? But then I was like, you needed Josh Allen to be a monster for that to happen. So it's not really an apt comparison.
I'm just glad you're not as delusionally high on Metcalf as you were. Like at one point, you had them like wide receiver 17, no?
No, the highest he ever got in my rankings was like right around that the Mclaurin Worthy territory, of like wide receiver 21, 22 kind of area. He's wide receiver 20. Where is he? 8 in my rankings right now.
Okay. Because I thought it was a little bit higher. My apologies, but I remember like at one point you were saying like he was a tier above Pickens. I'm like,
yeah, no, he's not a tier above Pickens. Like I also like I at one point I said he was like a tier. Like I would hope that Tetairoa Mcmillan turns into him, and it's like, well, I believe in the quarterback and believe in the offense a lot more with Tet McMillan. So
I'm more so playing around, by the way.
And then Rashee Rice, once he's back on the field, I'm sure he'll be a lot closer to the Smith-Njigba, Garrett Wilson types. I would imagine at the very least, maybe even more. But he is coming off a major injury. He is probably going to get a 4 to 6 game suspension. But at this point in the draft, 5th, 6th round, if you're in a deeper, or especially if you're in a shallower league, like just a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex PPR,
you have an IR.
You could take him at the mid 4th round or the late 4th round territory and just make up the difference later and weather the storm until he gets back.
You have an IR that allows suspended players too. That's another thing. I know some leagues do allow that if that's the case. Or like I've noticed like people have IRs where they'll allow suspended players or players that aren't playing that week.
COVID list or whatever.
Right, if you're in a league where it's creative IR settings and you can actually put Rice on your IR, I think you can even make the case he can jump like 5 to 7 receiver spots, maybe even more.
Yeah, no, for sure. And moving down to this next tier, I'll just talk about 2 guys that I think don't belong in this tier. Let me just put it that way, because I do have them in the tier closer with like Flowers and Metcalf and those guys. DJ Moore, like I mentioned, I'm a coward, and I do think that there's still a relatively equal possibility that he leads the team in targets. He's the guy that does take the big step forward. I was a lot less in on DJ Moore before I did like the archetype studies, where it's like when you're a prime wide receiver one, a guy who's under age 29, who's had a wide receiver one season before, that is very predictive. It is really indicative of a good pick in the mid rounds. And DJ Moore in home leagues will go a little bit higher than I'm willing to take him. Like I'm not willing to take him in like the mid 4th round where he goes right now, but I got to rank him a little bit higher than I had him before. Like I buried him into the 40s before, and to me, it was a little bit too low. So I have him a little bit higher now. And then Chris Olave, I know the offense sucks ass and the quarterbacks are terrible, but he's a 24-year-old wide receiver that's flashed like 30+% target share type of dominance. And as we made reference to, like if he hadn't gotten concussion issues and maybe had a better quarterback, he'd be all the way up with JSN and Garrett Wilson with his former college teammates.
I mean, I have Olave as my 33rd overall receiver, so I'm pretty much in lockstep with you there. DJ Moore, I have at wide receiver 36. Again, I did take my stance on Odunze. I also have Courtland Loveland, I believe, in my overall ranks higher than you do. I have Luther Burden definitely a lot higher than you do, so it really just goes for me. I think it's a lot more of an ambiguous target situation than maybe you do, but I mean, it's not like you have him like egregiously high. You said you had him like wide receiver 32. He's 36 for me.
Yeah, that's pretty much DJ the difference between those 2 guys. And then Igbuka, we've talked about on so many occasions. I don't even want to talk about him. It's just like the
wide receiver 32.
Yeah, the buzz is out of this world for Igbuka. I have him at 34. He's just an absolute beast. If Godwin's not going to be on the field right away, Josh Downs, very similar case to Zay Flowers, high separator, just in a worse offense with some more target competition. And then Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs, clear number ones, just the offensive environment and the age and some of that stuff is factoring in for both of those guys. If I knew Diggs was going to be healthy 100% week 1, I probably would have him at the head of this tier at the very least. But he is, still a question mark. Like they said he's going to track to play week 1 and all that kind of stuff. But I still have my blind, my ears perked up on Stephon just a little bit, because I don't want to be like all in on a guy who's like 31 coming off a blown ACL.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. Josh Downs also figures into the year. Very similar to the case of Zay Flowers as a player, I would say. Now, obviously, you could point, well, one's got an MVP level quarterback, one's got the Indianapolis Colts. But I also argue that the Indianapolis Colts, from a pure volume standpoint, aren't far off. And in fact, Yeah, sure, you're not getting this exact target quality. In fact, you're getting much worse target quality. But I'd venture a guess into saying the Colts are a much better bet to be a league average to slightly behind league average passing volume offense. Whereas with the Ravens, I think when you have Lamar Jackson, when you have Derrick Henry, like I would almost be shocked if they were like 24th in neutral pass rate.
Yeah, well, like in 2021, we got that 1 year where the Ravens just threw the ball like crazy. And Andrews, we saw what his ceiling was in that season where it was like lapped the field at tight end. And he was like the guy you needed, especially in like the big best ball tournaments and stuff. I just like with the Eagles and Ravens both, I'm just like, I want to invest in them and I'm not going to worry about the volume very much because I just want to watch, my players on these teams because they're just really good teams. And who knows, maybe break glass and it's like, holy shit, the Ravens threw 575 times and Flowers was a league winner and Lamar was a league winner and all these type of guys. So I just kind of want to invest in it. I'm not going to get too worked up about an offense when they're this good.
Yeah, and I do have to say this with Igbuka because I alluded to it earlier. We are one Chris Godwin quote from me ranking him as like a top 25 receiver. I'm not even trolling you.
Yeah, if we got word that Godwin was going to start the season on the pup, like for sure, because it hasn't actually been officially announced yet. Everyone kind of assumes he's going to be on the pup, but it hasn't been officially, announced that he's going to be placed on the pup and he's going to miss the first 4 games. Like yesterday, we got an announcement that Ayuk's not going to play till like week 6. If we got something like that for Godwin, then that would definitely bode well for Igbuka, and I would definitely move him up my rankings as well. Is there anything that you have on like Ridley? Because we didn't really touch on him, but he's just a clear number 1 receiver, got a quarterback upgrade. He was wide receiver like 27, 28 in points per game last year. He just feels like a minor hit if he hits. It's like, oh, you draft him wide receiver 33 and he finishes wide receiver 27.
So I'm going to keep it a stack. I didn't even realize that you included him in the video. Where do you have him ranked?
Wide receiver 35.
Oh, he's 41 for me. So
okay. When we were doing this, I did mention to you, I was like, hey, do you have Diggs or Ridley higher? And
I said Diggs.
Okay, well, I included Ridley because I thought you mentioned that you had him like 37 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Ridley, maybe he's just a just missed the cut guy. We also have, Jerry Jeudy kind of just missed the cut. Jordan Addison because of the suspension. Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, Debo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, Michael Pittman, Chris Godwin, assuming he was healthy. Khalil Shakir might have been on the fringe of this if he was healthy too.
Like I'll still obviously contribute a couple notes because he is on this list. Calvin Ridley, vanilla ice cream. Yeah, like if you believe in the quarterback, you want to take Calvin Ridley. Again, I do believe in Cam Ward, don't get me wrong, but if you believe in the quarterback a lot and you think Cam Ward is going to be, this year's CJ Stroud, this year's Jaden Daniels, like, yeah, maybe you draft Calvin Ridley a little bit more. Calvin Ridley feels a lot like how I felt about Terry McLaurin last year. And it's not like my opinion much has changed on Terry McLaurin other than the fact that he scored 6 more touchdowns last year. But does Calvin really actually score 6 more touchdowns than he did this year? You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. He would need like the Jacksonville Jaguars big plays and touchdowns, but with the Tennessee Titans volume. Because that's the last 2 years, he's been a completely different player, where in 2023, he was all boom bust, like big plays, touchdowns in Jacksonville. But then last year, he was like a consistent volume commander, especially once DeAndre Hopkins left in the trade to the Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, I mean, Ridley, maybe he produces, like, I'd be pretty shocked if he produced like a top 24 season in points per game, but it would probably mean that Cam Ward was pretty good. So that's pretty much what would probably take place there. But that was our top 36 receivers plus a couple honorable mentions. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, about 40% of you guys watching these videos are subscribed, and it is totally free to do so. So we really appreciate if you do it. Comment down below who's too high, who's too low. Check out our season pass if you want all of our rankings. Big updates coming to the redraft rankings manifesto, including, more fantasy news updates, the contextualized game logs coming very soon. And of course, the risk ratings, which a lot of you guys have been asking me about. Those will be coming over the next calendar week or so. In the season pass, you get access to that, plus the other draft guides of all the other creators in the Flock League, all of our rankings, including our draft rankings, plus our dynasty rankings, plus all the recent posts that we've had, plus in season, you'd get the weekly rankings, the rest of season rankings, everything you could need August through January to dominate your fantasy football league. That will be linked down below in the pinned comment for those of you guys that are interested. And of course, you can take some of this into action over on Underdog. $2 million up top, Best Ball Mania 6 if you guys want to compete for some big prizes. They also have some smaller contests. $5 entry. Puppy 3, I believe, is still live right now. Maybe it's closed as of the time you guys are listening to this, but definitely check out some of those contests and promo code FSE as you sign up over there. 50% deposit match up to $1,000 and a gimme pick in your lobby to help you spar Mike Tyson to get ready for your high school bullies, aka your league mates. You will train against the best so that you can be the best and dominate your league. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.